In the Season 4 finale, BoJack finally finds his half-sister Hollyhock. She's smart, warm, funny, she actually likes him, and he spends the entire season trying to be worthy of her. He gets sober, he stops sabotaging people, he shows up, and the show lets you feel genuinely hopeful about him for maybe the first time ever. Then, Season 5 opens, and he's addicted to painkillers, sleeping with his co-star, and strangling her during a blackout while filming a scene where his character strangles a woman. He didn't relapse because of trauma, he didn't snap because of pressure, he relapsed because there was no camera on him anymore. And that right there is the entire BoJack Horseman thesis hiding in plain sight. Not that broken people can't change, that some broken people have learned to perform change so convincingly they've fooled even themselves. And the most disturbing part? We watched it happen 6 seasons in a row, rooted for him every single time, and then got surprised at the end when the show told us we were part of the problem. As someone who has rewatched this show twice in full, taken notes, I will never show another human being, and spent a weekend genuinely upset over a cartoon horse, I've been sitting on this for a while, because when you actually map out what BoJack does across the full run versus what the show rewards him for, you don't see a redemption arc. You see the most precise dissection of self-aware narcissism ever put on television. So let me walk you through it, all of it, season by season, person by person, because once you see the pattern, you can't watch the show the same way again. Let's start with the thing that reframes everything else. There's a concept in psychology called performed insight. It describes what happens when someone learns the language of self-awareness without actually doing the internal work. They can name their trauma, they can articulate exactly why they hurt people, they can sit in a therapy session and say the right things with tears in their eyes, and then they go home and do the exact same damage, because understanding the wound and healing it are two completely different acts. BoJack is the perfect fictional case study for performed insight. By season 2, he knows his mother was cold and withholding. He knows his childhood was emotionally barren. He knows he uses people and discards them. He says all of this, out loud, on multiple occasions, sometimes to the very people he's actively hurting. And the show lets him use that self-knowledge as a get-out-of-jail-free card, both with the characters around him and, more dangerously, with us. It sounds profound. It sounds like the start of healing, but watch what happens after every speech like this. Nothing changes. The speech is the catharsis, for him and for us. We mistake his ability to describe the problem for evidence he's solving it. This is why therapy with Dr. Champ in season 6 is so damning. Champ is a terrible therapist. He's an addict himself. He's unprofessional. He centers his own recovery, and yet BoJack weaponizes even bad therapy into a performance. He does the worksheets. He says the mantras, he does the work on camera, and the second he leaves rehab, he's back to manipulating a reporter, back to lying to Hollyhock, back to the same patterns. Because the point was never to get better, the point was to be seen getting better. Now let's talk about the people, because BoJack Horseman is a body count show, and I don't mean dead bodies. I mean the people who get clipped by BoJack's spiral and never get their own episode to recover. Herb Kazaz. BoJack let the network blacklist him to save his own career, then spent 17 years not calling, not writing, not checking in once. Herb got sick. Herb built a completely different life from scratch in isolation, and when BoJack finally shows up in Herb's final months, it's not to apologize, it's to feel better. He needs Herb's forgiveness to resolve something inside himself, and when Herb refuses to give it to him, BoJack is genuinely shocked. He says all the right words, he acknowledges what he did, but he wanted absolution handed to him on a schedule that worked for his emotional timeline. Herb dies without forgiving him, and the show honors that completely. The tragedy isn't that Herb was cruel, it's that some things don't get resolved because real damage doesn't work like a season finale. But here's what people miss about that storyline. BoJack doesn't actually learn from it, he learns to talk about it. There's a difference. In season 3, he uses the Herb story as a funny anecdote with Ana Spanakopita. It becomes content, Charlotte and Penny Moore. This is where the show stops flirting with darkness and just dives in. BoJack goes to New Mexico, into this woman's home, because he's still in love with her from 30 years ago. Charlotte has built a real life, a husband, kids. She's done the work that BoJack never could, and he spends the whole visit quietly resenting her for it, for being happy without him, for having boundaries, and then he ends up alone on a boat with her 17-year-old daughter Penny after a school dance, and the show does not let you off easy. It's deeply uncomfortable, it's not glamorized, but then the story moves on to what it does to BoJack. Charlotte finds out. She tells him if she ever sees him again, she will kill him. That's the last we hear from Charlotte. We never find out what it did to Penny. We get a brief, horrifying glimpse in Season 5. Penny is in college, and she sees BoJack on TV. She has a panic attack. That's it. One scene, 2 seasons later. That's not an accident. That's the show mimicking exactly how the culture actually treats men like BoJack. The women and children around them become supporting characters in a story that's always, structurally, about him. The camera follows the damage, not the damaged. Every time BoJack destroys someone, we cut to his face, his tears, his guilt. The show forces us to sit with his feelings about what he did to them, and because Will Arnett is that good, because the writing is that sharp, we feel it so intensely that we forget to ask, but what about Penny? Now let's go darker, because the Sarah Lynn situation is where the show stops being a comedy that makes you cry and becomes something I'd genuinely classify as horror. Sarah Lynn was a child actress who grew up on BoJack's show Horseman Around. She was 8 years old, he was the adult in the room, and the show is explicit. She latched onto him the way kids latch onto the only person who treats them like a real person in an environment that's eating them alive. She tells him as much. "I just want to be your daughter," she says, as a kid, directly, out loud. And what does BoJack do with a child's emotional dependency on him? He uses it, not consciously, not maliciously in the classic sense. That's what makes it so much more disturbing. He stays just close enough that she keeps orbiting him for the next 20 years. He lets her call at 3 a.m. He reappears when he needs something. He maintains the connection, the way someone maintains a safety net they're not ready to admit they need. And Sarah Lynn spends her whole adult life reenacting childhood trauma, addicted, exploited by an industry that never protected her, reaching for the one person who was supposed to, and finding him perpetually half there. Then he takes her on a bender. She's been sober. She tells him she doesn't want to use. He pushes. He has her get drugs from a dealer while he waits in the car, and she dies in a planetarium while he's blacked out next to her. The show doesn't let him off the hook, but it does something subtler and more disturbing. It shows you exactly what BoJack does in the aftermath. He waits 17 minutes before calling 911. 17 minutes. The show puts the number on screen. 17. Possibly because he was too impaired to function. Possibly because some part of him was processing what the call would mean for his career, for his freedom, for his story. The show never tells you which. It just shows you the number, and then it shows you BoJack spend the rest of the series being sad about Sarah Lynn, not accountable. Sad. There's a version of accountability that actually changes behavior, and there's a version of accountability that becomes its own kind of indulgence. BoJack turns Sarah Lynn's death into a piece of his identity, his tragedy, his thing to carry, and carrying it becomes a way of owning it without actually paying for it. Season 6 makes this explicit. He tells the story at AA. He tells it to reporters. He tells it to himself. Sarah Lynn becomes a monologue, and the most horrifying part is how good the monologue is, how much you feel for him when he tells it. And this brings me to Diane. Diane Nguyen is the most important character in the show, and almost nobody talks about her that way. Diane is the only person in BoJack's life who consistently refuses to let him rewrite reality. She calls him out episode after episode with precision and evidence. She's the one who reads his memoir and tells him his self-pity is suffocating. She's the one who won't let him perform growth without showing receipts. And every single time she does this, the show frames it as her failing. She's too harsh. She's too demanding. She's projecting her own dysfunction onto him. But go back and watch her scenes again without rooting for BoJack. She's right almost every single time. In The Telescope, she tells him he was wrong about Herb. She's right. In That's Too Much Man, she tells him he's using Sarah Lynn. She's right. In Good Damage, she refuses to let him use her trauma for his show. She's right. The show is so sophisticated that it gives you a character who is consistently correct about the protagonist, and then uses the protagonist's charisma and our investment in his pain to make her correctness feel like cruelty. And the cost for Diane is enormous. She internalizes it. She spends season 6 thinking she's broken because she can't write the good damage memoir, because she thinks her function is to be hurt so other people can feel something. BoJack did that to her, not intentionally, but by making her his moral compass, he made her responsible for his soul, and that's not a relationship. That's a job she never applied for. The final season takes this to its logical endpoint. Diane has moved to Chicago. She's on antidepressants. She has a new boyfriend. She's happy in a quiet, undramatic way that doesn't look like the movies. And BoJack shows up on her roof in the middle of the night, and she sits with him until dawn, one last time, and she tells him she doesn't think about him the way he thinks about her. She's not his person anymore. Maybe she never was, and he has to sit with that. The show finally makes him sit with that. But then the second to last episode happens, and BoJack nearly drowns in his own pool in what the show frames ambiguously as an accident or attempt, and suddenly everyone is back. Diane flies back. The emotional gravity returns to him. He gets away with it, not legally. There are consequences. He goes to prison, but he survives. He gets the conversation on the roof. He gets the clothes. He gets the last scene with Diane, sitting in folding chairs, looking at a city that isn't theirs anymore. Sarah Lynn got a planetarium ceiling. Season 6, Episode 15. BoJack is dead, or dying. And he's in a purgatory dinner theater with everyone he's killed or lost, and Secretariat reads a poem. The weak breeze whispers nothing. The water screams sublime. His feet shift, teeter-totter. Watch out. It's about suicide. It's about the moment you jump and realize you don't want to die. It's BoJack's subconscious screaming at him to live, and it works. He lives, and that's the point where the show makes its final, most brutal move. It gives him back to us, because here's what I think the show is actually saying, and why most people flinch away from it. BoJack Horseman is not a story about whether a broken person can change. It's a story about what happens to everyone around a broken person who is just charismatic and self-aware enough that the world keeps giving him more chances. Every season is another chance. Every rock bottom has a lower floor. In Season 1, his rock bottom is being sad alone. In Season 6, his rock bottom is killing his former co-star and getting his TV show cancelled. The stakes escalate, but the structure doesn't. Someone gets hurt, BoJack feels bad. We feel bad for BoJack. Reset, and we keep watching, keep caring, keep leaning forward when the theme music hits, because the show makes BoJack feel things so loudly that it's easy to confuse his emotional volume with moral progress. That's the trap. That's what the show is trying to show you, not just in BoJack, in us. Because the question the finale actually asks isn't, does BoJack deserve redemption? The show refuses to answer that. The question is, why do you keep deciding he does? Think about how many real versions of BoJack exist. Talented, self-aware, emotionally articulate men who know exactly why they are the way they are, who can narrate their own damage in a way that makes you feel like understanding it means it's being addressed, who have whole communities of people rooting for them while the Charlotte Moores and the Pennies and the Herbs quietly rebuild their lives somewhere the camera never goes. The show is not a comfort watch. It was never meant to be. It's a 6-season indictment of the story we choose to tell about men like BoJack dressed up in talking animals and industry satire, so we'd let our guard down long enough to get implicated in it. BoJack didn't fool you. The show let you fool yourself, and the most darkly brilliant thing about it is that you probably still hope he's okay. I do too. That's the point.